Okay, alright. So hello dears. Ayan. So welcome back to our part 2 of your video on AST or Antimicrobial Susceptibility Testing. Okay, and for this video, we'll now start with the first type of your conventional testing method, and that is your disk diffusion method. Again, conventional testing method, when we say conventional, it's one of the traditional, okay, mga methods na i-perform sa una pa lang, and even until now, okay, in the routine lab. Alright, so we'll start again with your disk diffusion method. This is also known as your Kirby-Bauer disk diffusion method or Kirby-Bauer method. Kaya si Kirby o si Bauer ang nag-start ani na method, okay? Alright, and it's very common, no, sa inyong mga pictures, kana mga mo-circulate sa Facebook, kana mo-circulate sa, sa Twitter, no, especially, you know, when talking about antibacterial resistance, which is really one of the most pressing issues nowadays. So, di ba, mapili ng mga picture, okay? Alright, so ayan. So, this is again your Kirby-Bauer method, okay, or disk diffusion method. Again, it's considered to be the most widely performed AST method, okay? And this method tests one organism, usara ka organism, against multiple antimicrobial agents, okay? So, usara ka organism atong i-culture or atong inoculate, pero daghan na antibiotics atong i-test against it. Okay? Alright. Ayan. So, the medium is of course again MHA or supplemented media. Now again, recall, diba, the primary media of choice for AST is really MHA. Pero it's the base media because some organisms need supplements like blood, other vitamins, okay? Pero MHA yun na mag-start. Mo siya'y base. And then ang MHA pa rin ang adan o katong different supplements depending on the need of the organism under study. Okay? Alright. And the inoculum size na to is of course 1.5 times 10 to the 8 CFU per ml. So same siya sa imuhang McFarland na standard. Dapat yung turbidity niya. Okay? Alright? And always remember ka na mga inoculum size. Guys ha, medyo lumalabas sa boards din at saka sa mga exams. Okay? Alright. And especially katupong how to make the McFarland, kung saan to ng percent, pila ka percent na sulfuric acid, pila ka ml, pila ka percent sa barium chloride, o pila ka ml pod. So please take note ato. Okay? So di ba parang ano to siya? 99.5 ml of 1% sulfuric and then 0.5 ml of 1.175 ba? If I'm not mistaken, ha? Alright, so medyo ma-mix pa po na ako na. Pero please try your best to master that. Okay? Kay lumalabas sa boards or sa inyong mga exams. Okay? Alright. Now, the advantages of this diffusion method, it's greater flexibility in selecting antibiotics to be tested. Because again, di ba, it uses a lot of antibiotics. So, pwede dyan ka na, kanina organism, pwede kanina na set of antibiotics. Kanina po ng organism, another set. Okay? So, depending on unsa na mga antibiotics ang work against the organism. So, it's really flexible. Kaya pwede man imong i-test ang daghang antibiotics against the organism. Okay? Alright. Aside from that, it's user-friendly. Okay? User-friendly. May mga friends ba kayo dyan na nandyan lang pag may kailangan? So, mga user-friendly. Muna siya itong term, ha? Yung mga user-friendly na mga people. Charot lang. Okay. So, user-friendly, as you can see, this is relatively easy to perform. You just perform, di ba, multiple overlap, okay? And then, atong ibutang ang discs, and then incubate. And then after a while, after incubation, atong i-examine. Okay? So, it's not that demanding in terms of expertise, in terms of performance. And of course, it's relatively low ang cost because these discs can be ordered from a manufacturer. And these discs, okay, kay daghan na siyang sulod. So, na siya sa usa ka cartridge. Oh my gosh, di ko kabalo mo draw. Pero muna siya usa ka tube na inana. Okay? And then kani mga discs na nagsulod na siya, naka-stack na siya. So, daghan na kaayo siya. Okay? Alright. So, mga discs na siya. And then, if you want a disc, imo ra siyang i-dispense, imo rang i-press ang something diri mo, gawas na ang disc. Okay? Alright. Sorry, dili kayo makayong pagka-draw, guys, ha? Pero again, this is usually order from manufacturers and usa ka cartridge, daghan na discs. Okay? Alright. Ayan. Okay. Now, your MHA, again, of course, from culture media prep pa, it has dapat controlled variables, di ba? Kailangan niyang pH, kailangan niyang depth, di ba? Starting with agar depth, dapat about 3 to 5 millimeters, and ang average is 4 millimeters, because if it's greater than that, pwede, if less than that, false susceptibility, kay nipis ra ka imuhang media. So, therefore, dili kayo mo tubog tarong imuhang kagaw. So, pagbutang nimo sa antibiotic, nya gamay ra kayo ni tubo. So of course dako gyud kayong effect ang antibiotic against the kagaw kay gamay raman ang naa, di ba? So pwede siya false susceptible. Okay? Now if greater than 5 pod baga ra kay mong media, so mas daghang kagaw na pwedeng motubo. So kato mong antibiotic ma-overwhelm, okay? Dili na jud ma-express ihang full power. So pwedeng na ay false resistance. Okay. Next, you have pH dapat 7.2 to 7.4 because if decrease mo pH, there are certain antibiotics kani sila na ma-decrease ang activity, okay, which could lead to false resistance, and napoy antibiotic na tetracycline na mo-increase yung activity if less ang pH. So it's important na makontrol ang pH between 7.2 to 7.4 lang. Okay. And also we have different concentrations of calcium and magnesium because ang calcium dapat it's only about 25 mg per liter and ang magnesium is also 12.5 mg per L. So dapat 1/2 ra ani. Because again, increased concentrations of this kay i-decrease yung activity of aminoglycosides against Pseudomonas aeruginosa and tetracyclines against all organisms. I think kanina question nigawa siya sa boards, not during our time. Pero unsa daw to na situation na mo increase ang activity or like unsa ang consequence if increase imong calcium and magnesium concentration on your culture media for AST, decrease the activity of aminoglycosides against Pseudomonas aeruginosa. Please take note, okay? So muna siya mga kailangan to i-control because as you can see, if dili na to siya i-control, medyo daghang mga ma-affected sa atong results. And that could lead to misdiagnosis, mistreatment, okay? So dili ta ganahan ana. Alright? Dili siya ta ganahan na i-mistreat ta kanang dili ta i-take care og tarog ba? Huh? What? What's that? Okay. Alright. Ayan. So that's for controlled variables for MHA. Okay. Alright. Another one is thymidine content. Okay, it should be minimal or absent because increased concentrations will lead to false resistance to sulfonamides and trimethylprim. So another type of antibiotics. Okay, so as you can see, this is unsupplemented kanarag yung normal na ginagamit for MHA. But for some organisms that need supplement, example blood, you have supplemented MHA color red na siya. So this is usually used for mga fastidious, mga strep pneumo, okay, or strep pneumo, strep payo, mga inana. So they need blood. So munang mag-supplement ta sa imuhang MHA. But if pangutana ra gyud is the culture media of choice for AST, then it's really MHA. Because kani siya, it's still MHA naman pero nara gyud supplements. Okay? All right. Okay. All right. Okay. Ayan, sige. So again, unsupplemented MHA, it's usually most common good for ginagamit sa bisag kinsa na organism. So like basta any organism. Pero kani again supplemented is usually for mga fastidious. Okay? All right. Okay, now we go now to the antimicrobial agents. So mugani siyang disc diffusion method because we uses discs. And these discs are your antibiotics or antimicrobials. And ang measurement niya sa imong disc, okay? Ang disc, iyang diameter, okay, is about 6 millimeters. Okay, di ba munang if negative imong results sa AST or sa disc diffusion, 6 millimeter ato ang answer. Because again, that's the diameter of the disc. Okay, wala may zone na na-make. Okay? Alright. Disc should be placed again 24 millimeters apart, center to center, or at least 18 millimeters apart, edge to edge. So example, if you are going to put your disc, example, plate nino, and then you have 2 discs, if sa center ibutang, dapat ilahang distance is about 24 millimeters. Okay? And then if edge to edge, so example, edge to edge, so dapat 18 millimeters iyahang distance. Okay? Alright. Because nganong kailangan na i-distance? Nganong kailangan ta mo distance? Sure. Nganong kailangan na i-distance? Para we make sure na ang zone of inhibition if naman gani zones, dili sila mag-overlap, okay? And that perfect yun ang ma-form na zones. Again, para dili mag-overlap. Pero naay times na mag-overlap sila, samot time daghan na discs imuhang gigamit. Okay? Alright. Ayan. Next, must be placed flat and firmly attached. Because again, we want to make sure na, di ba, pag incubate na to ani guys sa plate Japon, it's naka-bali. Okay? Bali man ta mo incubate, di ba? Usually. So we don't want na matangtang ang disc. And aside from that, we want to make sure na ang disc mismo, di ba, sulod man niya antibiotic, ang antibiotic na nasa disc mo diffuse good properly sa imuhang agar. Okay? So dapat ato na siyang place firmly and flat sa imuhang media. Okay? Alright. And again, dapat within 15 minutes ang atong ibutang after inoculation of medium. Again, using what method or technique? Multiple overlap. Okay? Alright. Dapat within 15 minutes because again, pwede ma-deteriorate ang organism, okay? Or pwedeng dili pod mo function well na imong mga antibiotics. Alright, so dapat within 15 minutes after inoculation, mabutang na nato ang discs. Okay? Alright. And invert the plates within 15 minutes after disc placement. So atong key time is 15 minutes. So dapat within 15 minutes after nimo mabutang imuhang inoculum, mabutang na ang disc. And after pud mahuman kag butang, dapat after 15 minutes ato siyang i-invert after mabutang ang tanang disc. Ready na for incubation. Okay? Alright, so here's an example. You have, if 100 millimeter plates, usually 5 to 6 discs lang. Okay? And if 150 millimeter plate na dako gyud guys, as in nakatry mi aning 150 millimeter, it's really big. Like lisod kayo siya i-gunit sa hand. I think wala mi nagunit og hand ato. I think open na lang yun to siya. Work near the flame na lang. Kay dako jud kayo siya, dax jud siya, lisod kayo siya gunitan. Ay. Okay. So 12 discs. Okay? Please take note, maximum na of 12 discs for a 150 millimeter plate. Lumalabas din sa boards, lumalabas sa exam. Pila ka discs ang makaya sa usa ka 150 millimeter plate? 12 discs. And for 100 millimeter plate, kato normal na size imong Petri dish, if I'm not mistaken, na katong plastic, 5 to 6 discs. Okay. Alright. Ayan. So, for this placement, number 1, pwede siyang spring-loaded cartridge. So, imo na ni siyang i-press. Okay? I-press ni, so ma-push ning disc na mugawas. And then, ma-dispense na siya sa imuhang plate. Or, pwede mo gamit ka og forceps, dapat sterilized. Of course, pagbutan ni mo forceps, after a while, among ginabuhat, kaya amo na siyang i-push, okay? I-push jud ang disc sa imuhang agar. Gently lang po, di na po kay gahi kayo or like strong. Pero you push, of course, you push the disc para stay ra gyud siya firmly, okay? And lastly is kanang disc dispensers na kanang automatic. So imo ra ipasok ang plate diri and then imo na siyang i-push. Alright, ma-dispense na tong plate. Mo-dispense na ang discs. Okay? So, depending sa configuration ay 6 disc, 12, or 16. Okay, so daghan na kayang 16, no? So, usually sa 12 lang. So, ipasok nimo ang plate diri and then imong i-press ni, alright, para ma-dispense na itong mga discs with the corresponding distances na from each other. Okay? Alright, ayan. Okay, so next we have the target sites. No, these are just some example of your antimicrobial agents. Supposed to be, I think, hopefully na-discuss ni sa inyong intro to micro sa second year. Alright? Because again, it's important to know that the different antibiotics and unsay lang mga target. So kani guys, dili ka mo in depth kay medyo banga po ko ani, no? Wala kayo dili ko well versed ng mga antibiotics, like malibog pa ko nila. Alright? But please take note na this is important, alright? That you determine unsay lahang action, asa sila dapit sa bacteria mo atake. Alright, and the first one is cell wall synthesis. So these are antibiotics that target cell wall synthesis. So pwede na ilahang tangtangon ang protein, ilang na enzyme na i-release ang antibiotic against a particular component sa imuhang cell wall sa kagaw para ma-disrupt ang cell wall and of course mamatay na po siya. So example, beta-lactams, penicillins, cephalosporins, carbapenems, and monobactams. You have glycopeptides, vancomycin, cycloserine, and bacitracin, taxo A. Now, we also have antibiotics that target protein synthesis. So, you have aminoglycosides, tetracyclines, chloramphenicol, erythromycin, and fusidic acid. Okay? And lastly is those that target the cell membrane. You have sulfonamides, trimethoprim, quinolones, and rifampicin. Now, vancomycin, guys, please take note. Na-mention na dagay na ako ni. Unsa iyang toxicity, it causes the red man's syndrome. Ayan, ani sa imuhang TDM, therapeutic drug monitoring. Lumalabas din sa boards. Red man's syndrome, vancomycin. Okay. Alright. So these are just, again, examples in a nutshell of the different antibiotics na ginagamit jud nato. Okay? And unsay mga target sites. So meaning asa sa part sa kagaw sila mo atake. Okay? So pwede bang sa cell wall, sa protein synthesis, or sa cell membrane na function. And all together, ang ilang function is para dili na mo function well ang kagaw and eventually para mamatay na imuhang pathogen. Okay? Alright. Ayan. Okay. And you have nucleic acid synthesis. The last one is the polymyxins or polymyxins. So again, these target nucleic acids. So more on the DNA na good sa genetic material sa imuhang bacteria. Okay. Alright. Ayan. And next you have, when you apply man with the disc are, iyahang pag-diffuse is radial. Meaning, if nag-apply kag disc, of course, so iyahang pag-diffuse is pa-outside, radial. Okay? Radial. Munang naay zone na mahitabo. Okay? And that is known as your zone of inhibition. So for radial diffusion, of course, diri ka nagbutang, so katong concentration sa imuhang antibiotic, mas daghan sa duol and magka-decrease pa layo. Kagets ra? Kaya of course, nag-diffuse man siya. So mas daghan gid sa initial, sa duol sa disc, and then mugamay until magkalayo siya. And the zone of inhibition is dira ra gyud kutob, okay? Dira ra gyud siya kutob, dira gyud siya taman ang effect sa imong antibiotic. So example, if imuhang, di ba, taas kay ang concentration diri. So magkagamay until dili na gyud siya mo effect, and dito na mag-start ang zone of inhibition. Okay? Gets ra? So ang disc again, pagbutang nimo dira, of course, sa duol niya tag-as gyud og concentration. Then magkagamay until dili na gyud mo effect ang antibiotic against the organism, munang mo form na siya og zone of inhibition. Kay unable na siya to inhibit. Muna siya, zone of inhibition or ZOI. Alright? Okay. Ayan. Okay. Now, for disk storage, of course, it's important that we follow the proper disk storage. Number one is, of course, dapat, if long-term storage, dapat negative 20 degrees Celsius. So, if freeze yun siya, of course. Pero if working temp lang, like sige ra kang gagamit every day, pwede ra refrigerator temperature for at least 1 week, 2 to 8. Dapat na pod in sealed container with desiccant para of course dili siya ma-affected by moisture. And lastly, it should be warm to room temperature 1 to 2 hours before use. Okay, so before pa lang daan ka mag-AST, kung naka-ref na, kuwaon na mo siya daan para before 1 to 2 hours before use, na warm na siya at room temperature. And kung improper storage, kinsa tong duha ka antibiotics na ma-deteriorate dayon, it's methicillin and penicillin. Okay? Alright, please take note. Ayan. Okay, now for reading and interpretation, first one is we evaluate if ang growth ba sa atong kagaw kay confluent or like kanang even or like na ay even lawn. Ayan, even lawn of growth. If non-confluent, we have to repeat. And if walay growth or non-confluent growth, it means that your organism may be insufficient ang inoculum or na ay mutation na naitabo or most of your cells have already died pagbutang nimo. Okay, so this is a lack of growth. So wala joy growth na naitabo. So walay pulos imuhang pag AST, as you can see, di ba? Wala joy any streaking na nakitaan or anything. Now, your second one is, this is the confluent growth. As you can see, di ba? It's an even lawn of growth. Tanang surface sa imuhang MHA na cover gid sa tanan. Walay murag spaces if naman gani gagmay. Muna siya akong gi-emphasize sa multiple overlap. Dapat dugol inyuhang pag-streak. Okay, because we want to make sure na ma-cover tanan natong surface sa ato ang MHA para makaproduce ta aning confluent growth or lawn as in lawn of growth. Okay, and next one is non-confluent. As you can see, dili tanang surface or the whole of the surface of your MHA ang natubuan. It's only like specific areas, because again that could mean na non-viable or wala na nabuhi imong cells katong pag inoculate nimo, kulang imong inoculum or na mutation na naitabo. And if kaninyong na-experience aning duha, you have to repeat growth. You have to repeat the culture. Okay? All right. And for reading and interpretation, first we have examine for purity. Pure ka pa ba? Charot. If not pure, dapat ato i-repeat. Okay? We make sure again that the organism is pure from a pure culture. Because again, walay pulos if mixed culture atong gamiton. Kay we don't know kung kanang atong zone of inhibition, is it caused ba, example, kanang nag-test kag penicillin, you have mixed culture. We don't know if asa ba jud siya ni effect, is it in this kanina organism or kanina organism, di ba? So dapat we want to make sure pure culture lang yun para makaingon ka na if kanina organism na ay kanina antibiotic na ay zone of inhibition, it's really for that organism. Okay? So effect yun siya for that organism. Kay pure man imuhang culture. Okay. All right. So as you can see, presence of various morphotypes, not pure na ay gagmay na colonies. Okay? So that's a mixed culture. All right? And this is also na growth inside the zone of inhibition. This could mean na pure imuhang culture pero naanay mga mutants or resistance na nahitabo. Okay? Or imuhang pure culture, nag-develop resistance or mutants. Kay nakatubo naman siya inside the zone. Okay? Meaning na-tolerate na niya ang taas na mga concentration of antibiotic there. Okay? Alright, so muna siya. Alright, and for reading and interpretation, we read the back of the light, okay, and we measure, okay, using a ruler or a vernier caliper, okay, in millimeters. So first one is back of the plate with reflected light or, reflected light. Number 2 is back of the plate with transmitted light. So ato siyang ang plate ni ato siyang against transmitted light. That's also known as illumination, okay? Illumination, okay? Alright, and it's used daw for best for staph and enterococci. And pwede po atong i-open yun ang front of the plate, okay, with reflected light. Samot na if supplemented kay mas makita nimo ang zone, okay? So atong i-open ang sulod. Alright? Okay, but usually most ako na experience kana ang back of the plate with reflected or kani. So first and second. Alright? So again, we measure from end to end, we measure the diameter. Okay. Ayan, so here's an example. Ayan, so 6 millimeters, wala dyan zone. So muna siya negative because no zone inhibition and the measured diameter is of the disc. Munang if negative or resistant, we usually say 6 millimeters. Pero if na zone, so from one end to another end, that's how we measure. Okay, and that's about 16 millimeters zone of inhibition. Okay, so from one end to another end. All right. And for swarming organisms, mga special case, example, proteus, and hazes of growth, we look kung asa gid siya na-inhibit and we disregard the swarming. Example, kani number 1, muna ang swarming sa proteus, pero ang imuhang zone kay naabot jud siya diri. So murag walay kabantay mo sa smooth na outer edges, mo jud na yung zone. So diri ka mo measure, okay? And you have also hazes of proteus na swarming. So diri ang imuhang diri jud ang klaro na zone, okay? All right? And for hazes of growth, as you can see, naay mga hazes sa sulod. So mas klaro gyud ang kaniyang outer, that's the zone of inhibition. So dira ta mag-start og measure. Okay? So for proteus lang na namo swarm and for SXT o trimethoprim. Sulfonamides and trimethoprim. Okay. And for hemolytic organisms, we read the inhibition of growth and not the hemolysis. So as you can see, kani siya, of course, kaning na ay mga zone diri. And makabante mo na yung inner na black, that's the hemolysis. Pero ang yang zone is kani yung outside. Alright? Okay. So tilt the plate para mo differentiate better between hemolysis or the zone of inhibition ba. Okay. And for reporting, what we do is, again, di ba, we measure. And what we do is we base it on mga breakpoints or mga table na gi-provide na sa imuhang CLSI and UCAST. Okay? Ang CLSI, Clinical and Laboratory Standards Institute, and UCAST, okay, means European Committee, okay, on AST. Okay, tama. On AST. Alright. And we determine if ang measure ba nato is susceptible, is it intermediate or resistant. Ang intermediate, guys, there are many reasons daw ng intermediate, and one of that is susceptible siya, pero it's not as effective sa susceptible good na result. Okay? So, always mo go dito sa susceptible. Okay? Alright. So, yes. So, for the next video, since medyo taas man ni, we'll now go to how to read and interpret pa rin your disc diffusion methods. Okay? And for reporting. Alright? And then remaining conventional testing methods. Okay? Alright.